Paul D. Clark.
When were you born?
I was born in Los Angeles, California,
What was your birth date?
December 10th, 1922. I was a First Sargent. That's grade 1. That's top enlisted man.
And you had told me you were the youngest First Sergeant that you're aware of. And can you explain why you reached the rank of First Sergeant at such a young age?
Well, things worked out in the war. You advance quite quickly, and I was fortunate, and I don't think I had anybody particular pulling for me, but it worked out good.
But you had told me that you had enlisted, and you were how old when you enlisted?
Well, I enlisted in the National Guard when I was 16, which is not right or not legal. And then I took the National Guard that I was in Utah National Guard, and mobilized them, and we went down from Utah to San Luis Obispo, California. And we went there for intensive training. I joined the National Guard because my friends were doing it, and most of my friends were a little bit older, and also it gave us spending money. This was during the Great Depression, and it gave us spending money.
So you had enlisted before the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Yes, I had.
Tell us, you were en route to where? What was your first deployment, and where did you end up?
Well, we were December 4th, 1941. They put us on a boat, and we were headed to the Philippine Islands. And we were out a few days, and Pearl Harbor happened. And they didn't think that, well, they were afraid that the Japanese were going to invade Pearl Harbor, or invade Hawaii. And so they turned us back and to help guard Hawaii. And that was in December of 1941.
And when did you leave Pearl Harbor? When did you leave Pearl Harbor?
Oh gosh, the first time was probably in December of 43 or 42, no. And we got on a boat then, an LST, flat bottom boat, to go to the Marshall Islands, which Kwajalein is the main island. And we were ordered to take this island, and it was really well fortified. And anyway, we we got there, and they sent us into a very small island. It was only a few yards wide, and we were to set up our guns there on this small island and shoot over onto the main island, Kwajalein. And then that was the way the war began for us.
You were an artilleryman, and what size guns you were using?
As I indicated, it was a very small island, and we weren't our unit wasn't the only ones that were on the island shooting over to Kwajalein. There were several battalions, and they we were scheduled to start shooting, and we were excited because this was the first shot of the war for us, and we put the shell in the gun barrel, and it was ready to shoot it out, and the shell exploded in the gun barrel, and some of the men were killed, and it was very difficult for us. And anyway, from there, the men almost mutinied because they weren't going to fire anymore. They were afraid that the next shell would blow up too. And so the colonel came around and said, "Get on those guns and start shooting." And so we had no choice. And they did get on the guns and they started shooting. And fortunately, we went through all the war and didn't have any more blow-ups like that. But as I indicated, there were units other than us that were on this small island shooting onto the big island. And we, excuse me, we were, after the blow-up, it was very difficult to get the men back on the job. And the colonel came around and really told us in no uncertain terms that we had to do it. And like I say, we did do it, and we didn't ever have another shell blow up the entire war. But we fired all night the guns onto the big island, the main island. And the unit, we were in the front row of guns, and we were packed in so much that the guns were almost hub to hub. These were 155 millimeter howitzers, which is about 6 inches around, a little more than 6 inches. So we were firing well into the night, and I was exhausted. I'd been up for 24 hours, and so I thought, well, I've got to get a little rest. I laid down by the telephone operator because I figured that if they needed me, they could call on the phone and get me on the phone. And so I don't remember the exact time, but it was probably about 2:30 in the morning. And the unit behind us that shot right over our heads, they had a gun blow up. They put it in the barrel, and they closed the breech, and they pulled the lanyard to fire it, and it blew up. The shell blew up in the gun barrel, and it was worse problem than what we had. There were the whole gun crew, I believe, was killed, and so the men were about mutinied now. They were not going to fire those guns anymore, and but we still had 3 good guns, and the colonel said, "Get on those guns and start shooting." And so we finally did, but we were scared to death because of what happened before. Our unit was firing, and another unit was close behind us, and they were shooting their guns right over our head. And every time they'd shoot, if we were standing up, why, the concussion would blow us almost, well, lay us down. And anyway, I went to sleep just like that because I was so tired, even with all those guns going off all around us. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, the unit behind us put the shell in the breech of the gun and closed it, and the gun blew up, and it was a very bad situation because I think practically all the gun crew was killed, and it was really, really difficult.
So you had taken quadrilline eventually, and
Eventually we took it, yes.
yeah. Can you talk about what you did on the island after it was taken, after it was secured? What projects were you working on the island?
Well, we had to kill every Japanese there was on the island because none of them surrendered. And so when it was finally taken, it was only, we did this in about 36 hours or so. And after it was taken, they told us we were going to go back to Hawaii. And we were glad to hear that, and because we liked Hawaii, and we had been stationed on the Honolulu golf course, which was nice duty.
Can you tell us though about the runways that you had?
About what?
The runways.
I'm coming to that.
Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, the they put us back on an LST boat to go back to Hawaii, and there were quite a few boats going back, and so we had a convoy, and the Navy was supporting us, and we got about halfway back to Hawaii, and our boat malfunctioned, and we couldn't go anywhere, and they wouldn't wait for us. They didn't want the convoy just sitting there in the water, and so they went on and left us a lone boat out in the ocean, and we were scared to death because afraid a Japanese submarine had come along and sink us. We had no protection whatsoever. Anyway, they left us sitting out in the middle of the ocean, one little boat, and we were frightened because of Japanese submarines. And anyway, we sat out there for almost 2 weeks, and all the supplies were running very low. And finally, though, a boat came along and towed us back to Hawaii. And almost as soon as we got back there, they started more intensive training and making preparations to go invade another island. We had no idea where we were going to go, but it wasn't long. We got on another boat and we headed out to Saipan, which is in the Marshall Islands. And I'm sorry, it's in the Marianas Islands. And we had to take all our equipment and put it on the island. And the captain left me to make sure that all the equipment got onto the island. And I was doing that, and I was almost getting late off the island. It was almost, we could see that it was getting dark pretty quick. And so anyway, I saw that all the equipment got off the boat, and they put on little barges and went in to the island. And I was the last one off the boat. And I looked over at the island we were going to, which was Saipan. And it was, I saw a beautiful beach, and it really looked nice. And got close to the beach, and I could see the Navy man that was bringing me into the island. I could see he was real nervous. And he ran up on the beach and he says, "Hurry up and get up," and which I did. And the Japanese were shelling the island, or the beach where we were. And the pop, 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 they were mortars shells, and they're not very big, but they are very dangerous. And so I got off the island, or onto this new island, I should say, and we were making sure that we had all our equipment there. I got on the island that we're going to take, and as I indicated, there were popping shells all around on the island, and I was very frightened. But I had to get off the barge and let the Navy man go back to his boat. And so I got off, and as I indicated, there were these mortar shells popping all around us, around me. I was the only one left. And it was just about to get dark, and I looked around, and there were no foxholes that I could get into. And finally I found one, and it was a rather large foxhole, and it already had a soldier in it. But I didn't I didn't ask him, I just jumped in with him because I didn't have time to dig a foxhole. And the foxhole saved my life. And after a while, I started talking to the soldier that was in that first, and he wouldn't talk to me. He didn't answer. And so I finally turned him around a little bit, and he was dead. And I was grateful for him, though, because he was a shelter for me, and I spent the night with this dead soldier. And in the morning, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where my unit was. And I got out of the foxhole and was looking around, and the colonel came along and said, I told him I was lost. And he said, get on. He was driving a Jeep around, and I got on the Jeep, and he would drive all over the battlefield, and he was kind of a daredevil, and there were a lot of shells popping around us too. And I went there. Finally, he says he'd take me to my unit, and which he finally did. After we drove all over the battlefield, and I wasn't very comfortable with that, but he was the boss, and we drove back to where my unit was. I got off, and there we were. There were bodies everywhere because so many had gotten killed going up the beach on the other island. As I indicated, I was by the telephone operator, and I went to sleep immediately, even though these shells were going off all around me. And it wasn't too long that I had an impression. I had an impression that I should move. and I was so tired I just kind of rolled over, but this impression came to me again, and I felt even that there was a voice that said, "Get up and move now," and I did, and I ran some distance away, and that's when the unit behind us had their gun blow up, and it was really bad. They lost the whole gun crew. It was a very...
What would have happened if you hadn't moved from that foxhole?
What?
What happened in that foxhole?
No, by the telephone.
By the telephone operator.
If you hadn't gotten up and moved, what would have happened?
Well, if I hadn't gotten up and moved, I did move, and a few minutes later, I went back by the telephone operator, and there was a big hole in the ground about this big and about this deep, and was part of this unit's gun barrel. And if I had not moved, I would have, of course, been killed. And so I was very grateful for that. Anyway, Saipan was a very difficult battle, and it took us a couple of weeks to conquer it. And we finally did conquer it and had to kill most of the Japanese to do it. And so then they immediately had us turn our guns around on a right angle, and where we could shoot onto another island. And they told us we were going to invade that island. And that was the island of Tinian. And we went in at night, about midnight, and we were all very tired, but they gave us pills so that we could stay awake. And anyway, we started firing on this other island, Tinian, and then we invaded it and went into it, and I noticed that it was a very flat island, where Saipan, where we had been before, was very mountainous, and but this was a flat island, and the engineers were there almost as quick as we were, and they were with their tractors and everything, and they were building a new runway, and it was the longest runway I'd ever seen, or any of us had ever seen, really. And we didn't know why it was such a long runway, but come to find out later, it was for the B-29s, which was a new bomber that was to carry the atom bomb, and they worked round the clock, night and day, to get that runway completed. And we had no idea what it was for. And but anyway, we took that island, and it wasn't long that they put us on a boat again to go to help out in the Philippine Islands. General MacArthur was already in the Philippines. We were on the island of Tinian for a couple of weeks, probably. It wasn't so difficult to take as the island of Saipan was. And so we got a little bit of rest and recuperation. And it so happened that the Japanese had all kinds of cellars there on the island of Tinian. And these were full of canned crab meat and lobster and sake. And so some of the boys got into the sake and got a little drunk. And one day I was talking to one of my friends, and he says, "Sarge, you better get out of here. This so-and-so is going to kill you." And this so-and-so was a soldier. I don't know, can't remember his rank, but it wasn't very high. And I didn't pay much attention, but I looked around, and here comes this soldier with his rifle up in the air, and he saw me, and he says, "I'm going to kill you, Sarge." And there I was. I didn't know what to do, hardly, but I had the sense I had to do something. And otherwise, I'd have lost all my I didn't want to lose my authority. And so I thought, well, I got to do it. So I walked out, and he's coming, and I was scared, of course. And he says, "I'm going to kill you, Sarge." And I could see that he was drunk. And so anyway, I walked up to him, and I grabbed his rifle, took it away from him, and told him to get to his bunk, and I'd give him his rifle tomorrow. I could have court-martialed him, and it would have been very serious if I'd wanted to. But a lot of the soldiers did get drunk and enjoy the lobster tail and stuff. Anyway, we wasn't long, and they put us on a boat again, and we went to the Philippine Islands. As I indicated, General MacArthur was already there. He was on the island of Leyte, Leyte, and we were kind of in reserve because they were winning the battle, but it was a slow one. And so we were in reserve, and then they put us on another boat, and we went down to some of the southern islands and Mindoro, and there are hundreds of islands in the Philippines, and they extend for thousands of miles. Yes.
Can you describe the number of men in a battery and what their different jobs were?
a battery consisted of 112 men. And the main purpose of a battery is to fire these 155 millimeter howitzers. And it takes about 12 men to really function on a howitzer. And so we were does that answer your question?
Well, the men. So why did it take 12 men to fire? What were the different jobs that the men, the artillerymen would do?
Oh, you had a staff sergeant that was over 4 guns, and then each gun had a sergeant, and then there had to be it took 2 men to load the shells. The shells weighed just a little bit over 100 pounds, and so it took a man on each side of the tray with this shell on it, and they'd take the tray up to the gun, and then a third man would ram it into the gun barrel. And then it took several men to as backup and to get the ammunition ready to go. And then the rest of the 112 men were telephone operators, auxiliary personnel that backed up the ones firing on the guns.
And can you tell us about your experience on Okinawa?
Yes, just a minute. We got on an LST to go to another island in the Philippines, and we sailed past several islands, and it took us a couple of days to get down to the most southern island, and then we were getting ready to unload the LST so that they could invade this island, and it was we were in a kind of a cove, and there must have been well over 100 of these boats, LSTs, and we just got into this cove, and there were mountains all around us, and so consequently our radars didn't work, and because of the mountains, they come in low. The Japanese flyers came in low, just skimming over the mountain, and so we had no idea they were coming. And as I said, there must have been over 100 LSTs in that cove, and we were unloading our boats, and it ran the LST up on the beach, and we'd drive out the tractors and the guns onto the island. And as I indicated, the Japanese, they fooled us. We didn't know they were coming. And they, plane after plane came over this mountain, just barely skimmed over it. And each plane would take an LST or a boat, and the plane would dive into the boat, and now the planes were full of ammunition, and of course the boats were too, and so there were boats blowing up all over the harbor.
These were kamikaze pilots?
Yes, these were kamikazes, exactly, and they were kind of scary, I'll tell you. Anyway, there wasn't much I could do. I was standing on the upper deck of one of these LSTs, and I thought, well, this was getting later in the afternoon. I thought, well, maybe we're going to get by and not get dive bombed. But all of a sudden I looked up and I could see one was coming, and he was zeroing in on our little our barge, and so
what happened?
he just kept coming, and as I said, I was standing on the upper deck of this LST, and the Japanese air pilot, he came in, and he just kept coming, and the Navy, all they had was a 50 caliber machine gun, and they were shooting and doing their best to get these guys, but they couldn't seem to hit him anyway. He just kept coming, and I looked out, and right level with me was the Japanese plane. And it was so close that I could see the pilot, and he was gritting his teeth like this because he knew his time was up and he wasn't going to live through it. And I didn't think we were going to either, because he was almost to hit our deck. And fortunately, the Navy gunners shot the airplane. They must have hit a gas tank or something. I don't know what it was, but that plane blew up into probably 1 million pieces, and there was debris scattered all over the deck. But to the best of my knowledge, nobody was killed. We were very, very fortunate, because most of the boats blew up. So we continued unloading the equipment, and we thought we were going to have to fight there, but after we got the equipment unloaded, why they put our unit on another boat and headed us back to the Philippines. And we were only in the Philippines a short time, and there were preparations going on, and we knew that we were going to go on another invasion. And they loaded us on another boat with all our equipment, and we started out for Okinawa. They didn't tell us where we were going, of course, but that's where we were headed. And the boat,
Well, you went from Okinawa to the Philippines.
no,
Correct.
we went from the Philippines to
From the
Okinawa.
Philippines to Okinawa, okay?
Yes.
Okay, I thought, my mistake, I thought you were saying you went back to the Philippines. I thought you were saying you were going back from Okinawa to the Philippines. That's okay, it's my bad, we don't have to, don't worry.
Yes, we were on the Philippines,
Okay.
and then we got on this boat and to take us to Okinawa.
Okay, I understand.
And we didn't know where we were going, but we found out that it was in those islands up around Okinawa. And we, on our way up to Okinawa, there came a typhoon, and it was a very bad storm, and the boats would roll over like this, and they had to tie some of the sailors on with ropes so they wouldn't be washed away. And anyway, it lasted for 2 or 3 days, the typhoon did, and then it finally settled down. And we got to Okinawa, and we knew we were going to invade it. And we got on the beach, and there was no resistance whatsoever. And we thought, boy, this is going to be easy. And we were certainly fooled, because they had set their fortifications up in the mountains just up behind the beach, and they had caves and tunnels, and it was really well fortified. And but we were able to get onto the island without any resistance. And then it came all of a sudden after we got on the island. And Okinawa was a very difficult battle. Lasted for about 4 months. And many soldiers were killed and many wounded. And but finally, of course, we took the island, and we sat there a little while on the island, and we thought, well, maybe we'll get to go home now. We had been out in the Pacific now for the entire war, and we found out that we were going to get a furlough to go home for a rest and relaxation. And I was all excited about that. But come to find out, they sent a bulletin down that the captain and the first sergeant couldn't both go at once. And so, of course, the captain outranked me, and he went home and left me. And it was just a little cleanup work after that. And then finally they took a lot of the men home to go home. And finally they said that the rest of us could go home for a furlough. And so we got on a boat to go home. And of course we were all excited, and we got into the Caroline Islands, and we found out that the war was over.
And once you found out the war was over, when you found out the war was over, where were you?
We were out in the middle of the ocean near the Caroline Islands.
Okay. In September 1945, that was when you were honorably discharged from the Navy. I'm sorry.
The Army, yeah.
You have to edit that part out. I'm sorry. I apologize. When you arrived in Salt Lake City, you were honorably discharged from the Army.
Yes.
Okay. And so when you got back, did you partake of the GI Bill? Did you go to...
You bet I did. I no sooner got back, and I was only there or home about 2 or 3 days, and I got the GI Bill and went to school. And I went right straight through to school, to dental school. And that pretty much tells the story. And it was a great feeling to sail under the Golden Gate Bridge coming home. And because we'd been out the entire war, and we thought for sure that we were going to have to invade Japan, but we were blessed. The war was over, and then I immediately started school. Do you want to?
I think you've covered everything very well. Is there anything you can think of that we left out?
Well, there was one story he never did tell you. And
Okay.
This was on Tinian,
Okay.
and I was on guard duty, and I had a machine gun, and I was up on kind of a little mound, and I looked down and I saw some shadows, and they said shoot at most anything down there, because there wasn't supposed to be any Americans down there. And I got ready to shoot the machine gun down, and I looked, and there were little kids and a couple of adults and some little kids. And so anyway, I couldn't shoot them, and I let them go. And I could have probably been court-martialed for that, but...
For not shooting.
Huh?
For
Yeah,
not shooting.
probably, yeah. But I felt all right about it because the war was about over, and I did. I felt good that I didn't kill those little kids.